Boruto and Kawaki's next OTSUTSUKI abilities will be key in defeating Jura, at least in the plan that both Boruto and Kawaki have, as we know that right now, Kashin, Koji, and Boruto are not necessarily on the same page. And what they're moving towards doing in these next few chapters is ultimately master said abilities, and we have been given a massive hint as to what that may be. And first starting off with the fight versus Jura and Kawaki, as this is where the first major hint was given to us. We already know the discussion of Boruto ultimately using his karma, since he wants to defeat a character like Jura, and he believes that with Kawaki he will be able to do it somehow. Then there was obviously going to come a point where Boruto was going to use the karma. And that is exactly what we do end up seeing in the next few chapters that came afterward, with Boruto who ultimately went to Momoshiki to make a deal. Now how exactly that deal is going to go, we don't necessarily know, but one thing we do know for sure is that Boruto is going to be able to use his karma. Whether Momoshiki is in control or Boruto himself, we do know that the karma is going to play a heavy role. And that fact was always clear from the beginning, due to the simple fact that yet again, we saw that Boruto's karma ended up resonating with that of Kawaki. But one thing that we did see Kawaki use in that battle, which allowed him to do the most damage on Jura, was his amplification of his chakra rod ability, that ultimately ended up granting an ability that differed from anything that we had seen before, which was something that we hadn't even seen the likes of Ishiki ever showcase. It is quite likely that he could, but simply didn't choose to do so. Maybe a difference in their fighting style, but it was something that we haven't seen before. And that is the explosive power that we've seen Kawaki's chakra rods possess. Where at first, he did end up landing a move on Jura. He did attempt to hit Jura, but after doing so, nothing really happened. Jura simply tanked it. And then we saw Kawaki's chakra rods resonate with that of his karma, where the power of his karma ultimately ended up resonating with that of his chakra rod, which ended up granting his staff an explosive property that ended up doing a lot of damage to Jura. This was the most damage that we have seen anybody else do on Jura at the time. And then the next thing we end up seeing for the first time too is Jura end up using one of his secret abilities, or at least secret to us at that moment, which was the Divine Tree's properties of healing and also preventing Jura from taking more damage. So it acted in that moment as both a defensive and healing ability. That ability could potentially even have more properties to it. The fact that in the past we have seen that the Divine Tree has roots that allows it to drain people's chakra, as we've seen in the 4th Great Ninja War. Maybe this is something that is explored in the future, but when it comes to Boruto specifically, this is something that is going to be key. We did see that Boruto was capable of slicing Jura, which is something nobody else was capable of doing. Now imagine how much more damage Boruto is going to be able to do when he ends up amplifying his sword using his karma. Another major reason we see Boruto get a buff to his sword. Exactly how that buff is going to work we may not know, as I believe there's going to be many more properties to it, but one thing we know for sure is that using the karma, we're definitely going to see an amplification of those abilities. Personally, I do believe that it will differ from that of Kawaki, where on Kawaki's end we saw something more explosive, where on Boruto, since we already got a hint of what exactly Boruto does to his sword, he ends up coating it in chakra, preventing it from being nicked, but also increasing its slicing property and also the speed of it. So using the karma, Boruto is going to be able to greatly increase the speed of his swing, but also the slicing property, maybe even allowing Boruto to end up slicing Jura even when he is using claw marks. This could be something that we ultimately end up seeing. And alongside those buffs, as we're seeing with the rest of the Senju, Jura is likely to showcase even more abilities, as little by little we're seeing more of Jura's full potential, as we do see him using his finger as this sort of armor to fling outboard to the sword. This time we could see Jura apply it to other various parts of his body, coating himself in these chakra marks, allowing him to have his ultimate defense alongside the Divine Tree roots, which will ultimately make Jura even more powerful. But one of the major things that we're going to have to see both Boruto and Kawaki master is True Essence Karma, as this has been something that a lot of people don't really come to understand, and I've made videos on this in the past, but True Essence Karma has been an ability that Boruto and Kawaki have used once, especially if we don't count the future panel, the future scene that Boruto has seen when Boruto was tapping into Momoshiki's powers that ultimately was defied, and that future did not take place, where Kawaki ended up using True Essence Karma at the point. The one time we did see them use True Essence Karma was during the Code fight, where Boruto used True Essence Karma versus Code, and Kawaki ended up using True Essence Karma versus Momoshiki. Whenever Momoshiki taps into the Karma, he is automatically into True Essence Karma. So it means that there is clearly a difference in understanding and experience between Boruto and Momoshiki, which yields this difference when it comes to using True Essence Karma. That difference that we have seen when Boruto is capable of using it is either being pushed when using the Karma or simply having an emotional experience that is tied along it. Both of these ideas can be tied together. Boruto is pushed and then has this emotional moment which allows him to draw onto more of the powers of Karma. I like the way Ikemoto does it. Although it may seem confusing to others, this was the first moment in which Boruto had used True Essence Karma, and like we saw with Boruto's other abilities, when he uses the space-time ninjutsu for example, he doesn't really come to understand how exactly he is doing so. We saw that he was able to use space-time ninjutsu to bring both Ishiki, Naruto, and Sasuke to a different dimension, but when it came to bringing them back, he didn't know exactly how to do so, and had to be pushed by Kawaki. This demonstrated that Boruto didn't have the best understanding of his Karma, and since we know that Boruto hasn't been using the Karma in the past, this is definitely something that would have to be mastered, and Kawaki too would have to master it, so that when they ultimately come to fight versus Jura, he will end up using True Essence Karma at its full potential, both Kawaki and Boruto. And with a Kawaki who did say that he believes that he is drawing closer to power, in the sense that he believes that he can defeat Jura, and that Jura is not this immortal creature that everybody believes to be, Kawaki is drawing closer to that point. So alongside fighting versus Boruto, it is going to be crucial for them to use True Essence Karma to end up defeating them. So speaking about what they can do individually to gain the power necessary to ultimately defeat the likes of Jura, we have to first start off by discussing Kawaki. And when it comes to Kawaki, his path towards evolution is one that is quite simple, and that is using Amato. Amato is ultimately going to end up upgrading Kawaki even further. Although this upgrade was exponential, as Jura himself quoted, it was still not enough. And due to that not being enough, but giving Kawaki a glimpse at maybe he can potentially defeat Jura, as Kawaki was the first person to get really close and do the most damage to Jura, resulting in him using that secret ability for the Divine Tree, allowing him to heal himself. Kawaki is the only person who really can't tell us whether Jura is defeatable or not. So what Kawaki has to do is get even more powerful, and the clear answer as to what is left for him to do, which wouldn't ultimately end up decreasing his defense even more, as this is something that Amato himself stated that he did not want to do at all to Kawaki, as he wants Kawaki to stay alive so that he can bring Akabe back to life. So it's clearly not going to be something that will make Kawaki's defenses even worse. I don't believe that that's going to be the case. What I believe is most likely to happen is that just like we saw with the rest of the inner members, we're going to see Kawaki awaken a new senjutsu, and that will potentially come from Shiba OTSUTSUKI himself, where Amato ends up giving Kawaki some of Shiba's cells to push him along even further. We saw that this was something he did to all of the Kara inners, and this wouldn't include Kawaki, as we know that from Ishiki, he wanted Kawaki to be his vessel. So to me, it wouldn't make much sense that Kawaki ends up getting Shibai cells, because he is going to become Ishiki, and there could potentially be interference due to two genetic information coming to play. But due to the fact that now we don't have this threat of Ishiki, and Ishiki is gone and Kawaki can live his life freely, he is going to be injected with Shibai cells, which will ultimately result in him awakening his own senjutsu coming from Shibai exclusively. Now, how exactly that's going to work is going to be interesting. We saw that with other characters, they simply did not awaken it, like Delta. He did not awaken that Senjutsu. However, Kawaki is an Otsutsuki, so maybe he already has the base necessary to immediately awaken the Senjutsu that comes from Shibai. And what exactly that Senjutsu is going to be, personally, I have no idea. But it is quite clear that maybe with this base that Kawaki has of already being an Otsutsuki, it was never explicitly stated that you have to be an Otsutsuki to have Senjutsu, but it is something that comes from the Otsutsukis. So being an Otsutsuki may play a part, so that may be what allows Kawaki to be able to automatically get this Senjutsu ability, unlike Kashin Koji, who had to almost wait till he died before awakening this Senjutsu. Now, when it comes to Boruto, it is quite clear that Boruto's base is already quite strong. So I don't believe that he's going to use the same method of Kawaki, of going to a model and getting Shibai cells, but what I do believe is likely to take place is that he channels more of Momoshiki's powers. It may be intentional from Ikemoto for Boruto not using any of Momoshiki's abilities, or we've never seen Boruto use Momoshiki's abilities while Kawaki was able to utilize Ishiki's. This is the moment in which we're going to see Boruto utilize it. And I'm not talking about the advanced chakra control that we've seen Boruto end up utilizing after True Essence Karma, where with the Karma, he is now capable of using these larger scale Rasengans. Obviously, we have seen that being the case, but the unique abilities that Momoshiki had, even abilities like being able to stop time, and various different abilities that Boruto has been able to utilize. And as we've been told by Ikemoto, the ability to see the future is not Senjutsu from Momoshiki, so that doesn't count either. So we really haven't seen Boruto tap into Momoshiki's abilities to that extent, although we have been told that Boruto after his death is definitely capable of channeling more of Momoshiki's powers. The reason we haven't seen it is due to Boruto not utilizing his karma. So now that we end up seeing that Boruto is ready to use his karma to fight versus various different opponents, we should be seeing Boruto ultimately utilize these abilities. Now some people may say, is this going to be enough? What I will say to this is that Boruto and Kawaki's powers are going to be quite similar after both of their boosts. Whether it is enough to defeat Jura, I don't really know, but one thing that is going to be quite important is this concept of base power. Due to the simple fact that we know that the karma increases exponentially your base abilities, Boruto attaining this level of strength that is around the same level as Kawaki after getting his limiters removed and using his karma, then Boruto, who will finally use his karma and then use True Essence Karma, we're going to see an exponential boost to the Boruto who is already capable of slicing Jura's leg. So is that going to be enough? I don't really know, but is this going to be a great increase in power that we're going to see Boruto have? Definitely. And that's what Boruto is counting on. If his own exponential boost in power is not going to be enough, then maybe that of him and Kawaki both undergoing an exponential boost in power and fighting together versus Jura, maybe that is what is going to be enough to be able to defeat a threat like Jura. With the addition to Boruto being able to amplify his sword, just like Kawaki was able to do versus Jura, they are now looking like a serious threat towards somebody as strong as Jura. But to figure out how exactly Boruto's sword can come into play and affect how this battle ends up going, you have to watch this video right here.